For the last several weeks, I have been conducting a Bible study on Wednesday evenings entitled In the Beginning. It is an exploration of the book of Genesis, and accompanying this in-depth Wednesday Bible study has been this Sunday morning series that I have entitled Genesis at the Movies. And I really hope it's a means to interest you in the biblical text, a little bit of storytelling for the storytelling. So as we move into chapter 3 of Genesis this morning, I will speak to you about a 2013 film entitled The Counselor. Now, last week when I talked about the movie Gravity, I gushed all about it and how you should all rent it and watch it as soon as possible. How many of you rented it and watched it this week? See, this is why preachers fail at their jobs. It wasn't hard. I didn't ask you to go to the Congo. Well, as much as I gushed about the movie Gravity, now this will be a prime example of the story in Genesis 3. When it comes to the movie The Counselor, I make no such recommendation that you watch it. Everyone will go rent it now. It is a sheer and unmitigated disaster. It is a $25 million expenditure of funds that should have been spent on feeding the hungry or educating preschoolers. A colossal disappointment, only magnified by the fact that the writer, director, and cast were all top-shelf, A-list, award-winning superstars. First slide to the director, Ridley Scott. He has directed or produced some of the biggest blockbusters in cinema history. Alien, and all the sequels that have followed. Blade Runner, Thelma and Louise, Gladiator, Black Hawk Down, Kingdom of Heaven, American Gangster, The Martian, Napoleon, Gladiator 2, and dozens of others. Okay, Napoleon is not that great. Doug Balfour, I'll give you that. But compared to The Counselor, it's like Citizen Kane, just so you know. And then there's the writer of the film, Cormac McCarthy, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author who has had multiple books adapted for the screen, including No Country for Old Men, one of the greatest movies of the 21st century thus far. And then there is the cast. Slide, please. Michael Fassbender, Ireland's greatest living actor, maybe. He was in Band of Brothers, 12 Years a Slave, Inglourious Basterds, The X-Men. He is a legend. Penelope Cruz, the most awarded Spanish actress in the history of the world. She is spoken of in the same hushed tones as Sophia Loren. Cameron Diaz, The Mask, Something About Mary, Any Given Sunday, Vanilla Sky, Gangs of New York, Charlie's Angels, another icon. Javier Bardem, married to Penelope Cruz. Before Night's Fall, Skyfall, Dune, The Little Mermaid, Best Supporting Actor in the aforementioned No Country for Old Men. And last but not least, Brad frickin' Pitt. Will that man just at least get a wrinkle? I hate him. A River Runs Through It, Legends of the Fall, Ocean's 11, Seven, Fight Club, Achilles, World War Z, Moneyball, Fury. I'm exhausted just talking about it. So you've got Ridley Scott, Cormac McCarthy, all of these great actors and actresses, all on the same project, all in the same movie, and it is a lead balloon. A high-powered lawyer, played by Fassbender, gets into financial trouble and decides that one of his more unsavory clients might have a way out for him if he will just make just one drug deal. Just one. And it will net him millions of dollars. His problems will be solved. He will ride away into the sunset with his perfect life, a perfect wife, and no strife. But no, it doesn't quite go like that. If it could go wrong, it does. Everything goes wrong. And this man who had everything, perfection, a career, a future, professional admiration, status, respect, integrity, the woman of his dreams, he loses everything because of the choices that he makes. Near the end of the movie, there is one redeeming scene. The counselor has gone to Juarez, Mexico, to beg for the life of his fiancée. She has been kidnapped by the drug cartel in retaliation against the counselor for bungling up that drug deal, that just one drug deal that was going to solve all of his problems. And now he's on the hook to the most notorious of criminals involving millions of dollars. And all he gets is a phone conversation with El Jefe, Spanish for the boss of the cartel, played by the gentle, sophisticated, but terrifying Ruben Blades. And the counselor persists in his begging and his negotiating and trying to atone for his failures, trying to get his fiancée back, but it's too late. And El Jefe asks him, "Do you know the poet Antonio Machado? Caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar." Traveler, there is no road. You have made your own road by walking it. So I urge you to see the truth of the situation you are in. This is my advice. It is not for me to tell you what you should have done or not done. The world in which you now seek to undo your mistakes is different from the world where your mistakes were made. There is no more choosing. There is only accepting. The choosing was done a long time ago. You are the world you have created. There is not a better or more perfect commentary on Genesis 3 than that last brief line. You are the world you have created. Empowered with the capability of choice, humans build our own world, be it a world of blessing or of cursing. There's probably no story that has shaped Western culture more than this one in Genesis 3, the Garden of Eden, not the counselor. Theologians call it the fall. Adam and Eve are expelled from paradise. The primordial couple forfeits perfection by violating one commandment. There being only one possible commandment that could be violated. But you know human nature. As soon as you tell one of us not to look inside the box, the desire to have a peek for ourselves becomes unbearable until the top of that box is torn away and all the contents, whatever they may be, are poured out on the floor. Amazon Prime will see this very week that in Walton County, Florida, there was a major uptick in watching the movie The Counselor because a group of people was told not to do that. Look at where Genesis 3 shows up in some of our most famous icons. Slide, please. On the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, painted by Michelangelo. In the works of Dante, launching the Renaissance. John Milton, Paradise Lost. John Steinbeck, East of Eden. It's a major influence in Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith, capitalism's most holy text. In popular culture, the TV show Killing Eve. Britney Spears walking out at the MTV Music Awards with a python draped over her shoulders. It's the philosophical scaffolding for movies like The Matrix, The Truman Show, Jerry Maguire, and yes, The Counselor. And then there are the idioms from the Garden of Eden, all around us, idioms that we use all the time. We say things like forbidden fruit, the tree of life, my eyes were opened. We speak of someone's downfall, or they fell from grace. We use the phrase original sin, even though it's not there in the text. And then a favorite, the devil made me do it. Sowing yourself a fig leaf when you're ashamed. People who are not necessarily religious, who may have never stepped foot inside of a church, still know the story of Adam and Eve and the loss of innocence in the Garden of Eden. And such people are greatly influenced by it. We all are. As an origin story for Western culture, as an explanation for all the trouble in the world, for the flaws of human nature, for our aversion to snakes, which is almost universal. And we may even reflect upon the major theological interpretations of this story without even knowing that we're doing that. Now, on Wednesday evening this week, I'm going to don my scuba gear and dive deep into the theology of Genesis chapter 3. I'm not going to do that this morning. But on Wednesday night, I'll be talking about this fall, this grand narrative that have shaped our world, a story that we know better than any other story in the Bible, this loss of innocence. And I'm going to talk about the various interpretations from the ancient Hebrews to Augustine, from the Greek Orthodox Church to the Reformers. But for the time I have left this morning, I want to return to the words of El Jefe. The Counselor is a terrible movie, but as such, it provides an incredible interpretation for this terrible story. Because before we dive into the implications of Adam and Eve's expulsion from the Garden of Eden, we have to grapple with the fact that they are like us and we are like them. If we are anything at all, we are human, and to be human is to have the power of choice. Choice. Free will. Being an autonomous moral agent in the world. This is a wonder-working power that God has granted to all of us. And like all power, it comes with the highest potentiality and the most chilling of consequences. Caminante no camino se hace camino el andor. Traveler, there is no road. You have made your own road by walking. You are the world that you have created. We live in a world of our own decision making. William James, one of the great American minds, was giving a lecture on the nature of the world to an audience. And when he finished, a woman came up to him after his lecture and she said, "Dr. James, I am so sorry, but you are wrong about the nature of the world." And I'm told that James was a mischievous man by nature, and he gave her a little wink and he said, "How so?" And she said, "The world is not how you have described it. The world is riding on top of a turtle." Now, she didn't make that up. That is the origin story of the Iroquois people and many native tribes. That the muskrat descended from the clouds, dug up some dirt from the bottom of the seafloor so the animals could follow him down and have a place to land. But the dirt was so heavy he couldn't hold it long enough and he had to throw it on the back of a turtle. And that is a Native American origin story. Well, she was going to that story. And Dr. James was just delighted by this. And he said, "Well, ma'am, what is beneath that turtle?" And she said, "Well, that's easy. Another turtle." And he laughed and he said, "Well, what's beneath that second turtle?" And she threw up her hands and said, "Don't you understand? It's turtles all the way down." I love that story. Your life, yours and mine, your life is turtles all the way down. I'll explain. Today, you are riding on the shell of the decisions that you made yesterday. And those decisions float on the back of the decisions you made the day before that. And those decisions are atop the decisions that you made the day before that, the month before that, the year before that, the decade before that. It is nothing but turtles all the way down. The decisions that you have made, and as they have stacked up, have formed the life that you are now living, for better or for worse. Much of your life is the result of choices that other people have made, for sure. You didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose your family of origin. You didn't choose your particular chemical makeup. But this does not release you from the responsibility over your own life. You, as long as you have today, are required to choose the life that you would have, regardless of your circumstances and regardless of how well or badly you have chosen in the past. And if you think, no, I'm not going to do it, I'm not deciding anything, then my friend, you have made your decision and other people will make your decisions for you. Those are the rules. And those are the rules that have been with us since the Garden of Eden. I love a story from Ronald Reagan. His aunt bought him a new pair of shoes. And back then he had to go to the cobbler to get them. And he was just a little boy, and he goes into the cobbler's shop, and the cobbler says, "Do you want square-toed shoe or a pointy-toed shoe?" And the young Ronald Reagan said, I can't decide. I don't know, I can't decide. The cobbler said, "Fine, I'll take care of it." He comes back a week later to get his shoes. One's got a pointy toe and one's got a square toe. And he said, "Let this be a lesson to you. If you can't decide, someone else will do the deciding for you." Now, some neuroscientists and some philosophers do not believe in the power of choice. They call it an illusion. And for that matter, there are some theologians who don't believe in it either. Some theologies speak of God as predetermining everything, the saved and the lost, the redeemed and the damned, and there is nothing anyone can do about it. Free will does not exist in this equation, and we are all just playing out our bit roles over which we have no control. I'm going to bookmark that with the theologians for Wednesday night, and today stick with the philosophers and the neuroscientists. People like Thomas Hobbes, who said this, slide please, "Life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short." Really optimistic guy. And he said the only solution, he says, free will is so dangerous that it will destroy a society, and the only thing we can do, and he was an Englishman, is give all our power to the Queen and then just eat, drink, copulate, and die and try to keep as much peace as possible. And then Jean-Jacques Rousseau was just as fatalistic. He said, "A thinking animal is a monster." And pointing to the Garden of Eden, he said, that was paradise, for sure. Before we had consciousness, before we knew right from wrong, before our brains took over. Back then, we could just eat acorns and sleep under the stars and have sex with whoever we met in the woods and murder any rival who presented himself without consequence and just allow animal instinct to show us the way without limits or laws or guilt or shame. I am so struck by that phrase, a thinking animal is a monster. And it sure can be. And that was his assessment of the human creature. We are aware of morality. We are aware of ethical choices that are demanded of us, but we really can't rise to the occasion. We can think, but the animalism of our species is too strong for anything of virtue to prevail. And both those guys sound actually a whole lot like the Apostle Paul in Romans 7 when he said, "I don't really understand myself for what I want to do, for I want to do what is right, but I don't do it." That is the human condition. If we move to scientists, their biological conclusions prevent them from embracing anything about free will. Sam Harris, Robert Sapolsky, Helen Beebe, they say, look, you're just a collection of neurons. You're just a sack of organic material. And when you think you are making choices, all it really is that instinct animal that you evolved from in the back of your brain, that lizard brain of yours, and it's just reacting to the stimuli around you, and you really haven't made a choice in your life. Well, I don't buy any of that. First, I'm not as pessimistic as Hobbes or Rousseau. And second, while I appreciate the sciences of neurology and physiology, I still hold to the belief that God has breathed into our nostrils the breath of life. There is a spark of the divine within us, as the Greeks used to say. There is an awareness, an ability to reason, to make choices. To be made in the image of God is to create our world by the decisions that we make as God created this world. We can't really deny this gift of free will. We can only wrestle with it because it is a gift, but it is the most problematic gift that God ever gave anyone. We have freedom, but it has its limits, and as soon as you put limits on human freedom, the desire is to go test the limits. And if you don't believe that, go babysit a 3-year-old for an afternoon. And when we test these limits, cataclysmic failure is often the result. So we go looking for a scapegoat, someone else to blame for our choices. And we can do that. You heard it in the text. You can blame it on the devil. You can blame it on your parents. You can blame it on the alcohol. You can blame it on your genetics. You can blame it on the circumstances of your life. You can blame it on Adam. Blame it especially on Eve. That's been going on for centuries. But in the words of the great theologian Jimmy Buffett, some people claim that there's a woman to blame. But I know it's my own damn fault. We're back to El Jefe speaking to the counselor. You are the world you have created. What kind of world will it be? For yourself, for your future, for your family, for your community. It's a heavy responsibility, but it is inescapable. One last question. This one is not from the theologians or the philosophers or the scientists or the movies. It's a question from Genesis 3 itself, the question that hangs over this passage. It hangs over human history. It hangs over each of us as an individual. It is the question of God put to Adam and Eve, put to the human species, put to all of us in Genesis 3:13. What have you done? It reminded me of Viktor Frankl's most quoted words. Frankl, the Austrian physician and physiologist, psychologist who survived Auschwitz, a hell created by thinking creatures, monstrous creatures. And he said this: everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, and that is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. It is clear that you cannot control what happens to you in this life, but you can always control what you will do about what happens to you. And he gives an example. For example, in the concentration camps, in this living laboratory and on this testing ground, we watched and witnessed some of our comrades behave like swine while others behaved like saints. Humans have both potentialities. Which one is actualized depends on our decisions, not our conditions. And those decisions are ours each and every day.